In 2019, Bill 21 passed in Quebec. It seeks to reinforce state laicite, which is the separation between church and state, by prohibiting the wearing of religious symbols for certain public employees, such as teachers, police, judges, etc. In the bill's opinion, this extends to hijabs and turbans, which rendered Muslims and Sikh communities to be far more proportionally affected. 73% of the Muslim women polled report that the bill has affected their job prospects. Here's why scholars and academics in fields like religious anthropology have long criticized such applications of secularism as accidentally upholding a Christian worldview instead of actually delivering neutrality. As a disclaimer, I usually just cover history and anthropology of the Middle East from a secular perspective. I don't usually talk about politics. It just happens to be the area of intersection here. It's also a very common thesis to talk about, religious anthropology and other fields. For great sources on this, I recommend these two books, especially The Politics of the Veil by Joanne Scott. To start from the basics, we live in a very diverse world, both culturally and religiously. In fact, this diversity is not just surface level. It's very deep in the modes of expression where certain religions manifest. And this even affects the frameworks we use to look into different religions. And you'll know why that's important in a second. The concept of religious symbolism itself might be Christian in a way. Religious expression in Christianity, especially in the West, has always involved heavy use of symbols and objects. In fact, it's often studied through a framework called material religion, where religion expression is studied through objects and spaces rather than in the body itself. Religious symbols in this case are disembodied. They are not in the body, but they are often manifest as accessories that people wear that become a full expression of the faith that are inherently also partially declarative, as in like when someone is wearing a cross and that cross is apparent, they are also declaring their religion. In contrast, many other religions such as Islam, Sikhism, and in some instances Judaism are better studied with frameworks such as embodiment. Bear with me, we're getting to the simple direct stuff after this. Embodied practices also can be symbolic because they are inherently a state of being where it's hard to separate the religious tradition from the person, from the cultural tradition. In fact, it doesn't come from symbolism. Hijabs and turbans have long existed in their respective regions outside of the religions. Perhaps an equivalent of this in Islam for men is when some Muslim men grow their beards in order to gain the spiritual reward because it was a sunnah, something the Prophet used to do. But this is not declarative. You can tell that this person is a Muslim just by them having a beard. If we look at Islam as an example, Islamic views on religious iconography ranges from highly discouraged to extremely prohibited. Muslims do not like depictions of Muhammad, for example, in order to prevent said iconography from gaining any religious significance. This is also why, in part, instead of painting being popular in the Islamic world in medieval times, when it was in Europe, the medium of choice was calligraphy. But what's really interesting is that it is actually not allowed for, say, the hijab to be a declarative practice, as in to signal to others anything about the person. There's a hadith that says, "Do not do deeds to be seen by people." And so, when you encounter a Muslim woman wearing a hijab, they are not declaring that they are Muslim to you. You are the one who goes, "Oh, it's a Muslim." Anthropologist John Bowen calls this misrecognition, the idea of applying a Christian understanding of what religious expression means, to think that Muslim women wearing a hijab are promoting Islam or making a political statement or even declaring that they are Muslims. But millions of women around the world wear hijab for many various reasons, and none of them are declarative. I mean, some wear it as a discipline and a belief in a spiritual reward. Some wear it because, in their belief, it filters out objectification with the way they interface with society. And of course, many would wear it to look like their peers and their mother and grandmother. For the same reason, women in the West wear a wedding dress for their wedding, but if you're an Indian woman in the West, you would wear a sari, just in an embodied cultural religious way that doesn't have a perfect parallel in the West. But more importantly, if you actually listen to hijabi women, they will tell you that hijab becomes the minimum amount of clothing they are comfortable wearing and that they want to wear, which is expected if you spend your entire adult life wearing one. You won't just take it off overnight. Which is why 73% of the Muslim women polled say that this affects their future job prospects, instead of saying, "I will take off the hijab." Well, some might invoke the trope that, oh, they are being forced to wear it, which is true in some parts of the world, but it can be true here in the West. Like, what systemic structure exists to even allow someone to be forced to wear the hijab? In fact, then why is it that, a lot of Muslim feminism work exists, and instead of complaining about how Muslim women, are forced to wear the hijab, they often complain about quite the opposite, like that society keeps, that they face a lot of discrimination, like throwing away the future job prospects of 73% of them. But this highlights something else that is very important that this is stepping on. Is feminism about taking away agency of women because, we know better? Or is it about giving agency, like take off your headscarf or don't come to work tomorrow? Seems like a very extreme measure. I'm not advocating for anything, by the way. This is not coming from a religious place. Many religion anthropologists would fully agree with what I'm saying in the West, secular anthropologists. But perhaps the worst part about this, which is a consistent criticism that even happened in the France hijab ban legislation, is that the affected communities were not consulted. Instead, this Christian understanding of what religious symbolism means was applied here. And, like, if you don't want to go to the communities themselves, at least, consult academics or anthropologists or, comparative religion scholars or anything of that sort. And what's even worse in the case of Bill 21 is that it used a clause that makes it so that it can't be challenged. Like, just close the conversation. We're moving on. But let's go back to like embodied practices and religious symbolism. Can you tell me which one of these are Sikh? How can it be declarative? Turbans are one of the oldest and longest lasting articles of clothing in human history. It appeared around 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley civilization, but has also traveled all across Africa, especially North Africa and Asia, and even at one point parts of Europe. Embodied religious practices have this tendency of, instead of creating symbolism, of co-opting existing cultural traditions, because it's all about upholding tradition. Turbans are also very diverse. They are as much of a cultural group indicator, as much as it is a religious indicator. The idea that a teacher could go to school in a Rajasthani turban and not a Sikh turban, because one has religious connotation that is not even being signaled, is a bit odd. Especially that, like, the average person would not be able to tell. This man is apparently Muslim, by the way. Should these women be allowed to teach in a secular society? This is, of course, a Levant Christian community that still kind of practices the headscarf out of cultural tradition rather than just purely a religious tradition. Female head covering has been a cultural tradition in the region for 4,000 years, or over 4,000 years, since ancient Mesopotamia, that was co-opted by many religions, really. There is also an important legacy that needs to be centered here because it still lives in the memories of Muslim women, especially if they are North African. During the French colonialism of Algeria, killing 1.5 million people and refusing to acknowledge it until today aside, dropping 4 nuclear bombs and refusing to clean the chemical waste aside. It's also one of the most well-documented cases of cultural replacement or erasure. We're talking banning local languages and replacing them with French, or writing a huge literature about a fake history about how the French civilized the Algerians. They also viewed Algerian women as the key to crack the Algerian identity. So they did massive, multifaceted campaigns to sort of unveil Algerian women. And in theory, that should be easy, right? Like, as they used to say, behind the veil of every Muslim woman is a Western woman waiting to be rescued. But instead, hijab became a symbol of resistance. Women wore different types of head coverings instead, or veiled between checkpoints and unveiled only for checkpoints. And women were not previously wearing a hijab, started wearing hijab for solidarity or for expression of cultural identity and reaffirming it. This was very well documented in Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth, which is considered one of the most important books on colonialism. And I think this quote perfectly captures why forced assimilation just generates resistance to assimilation instead. It generates isolated communities. Thank you for watching, and I hope I didn't offend anyone. It was not my intention. The reason I covered this is that after the 2004 France hijab ban, there was a mountain of academic work that essentially made it that there's almost a scholarly consensus that such bans are not secular or neutral. In fact, they uphold a Western Christian worldview on other traditions. Quebec philosopher Charles Taylor and others argue that it's assimilation dressed as secularism. Now, one last thing to think about, since ideas are sometimes sold to us in deceitful packaging. What do we lose when we give women an ultimatum between their agency over what they wear, the minimum amount of clothing they are comfortable wearing, and their jobs, and ultimately, what's worth that?